thank you very much, I would like to express the regrets of Commissioner Jourova, who was, due to urgent business in other areas, not able to come today, but also for her, of course, this subject is very important. It was her, after all, who negotiated the European Code of Conduct with the big internet social network providers to make them move forward. I would like to thank you, Ina, and all the participants of today's conference for being here. European networking on this subject is very important, not only in terms of exchange of best practices, but also as a clear sign that we together care and that we are able to organize ourselves. And the lesson of European politics, which I have just recently seen in data protection, is that if 20 people engage, 20 activists, with the European Parliament, with members of the Parliament, with national governments, with national MPs, it makes a huge difference. Our democracy works. And that's why I would like you to encourage others, to bring others along, but also to be very active yourself, very visible, very political on this subject. Because as we have heard from Gerd Billen, the companies are very big, they are very powerful, and they will move only if they feel the heat. And part of the heat must come from civil society. Governments alone will not be able to manage this, but civil society has to also take a stance and do both practical work, but also political work. Democracy requires engagement of the people, and fundamental rights equally. And democracy and fundamental rights cannot be maintained by the European Commission and the governments on their own. In fact, the state is never able to create the conditions of democracy itself. So that's why I'm very happy that all of you are engaging on this important subject, important both for fundamental rights of individuals who are being attacked, who cannot speak freely anymore without fear, journalists, political office holders, but also members of minorities, but also, which is important for our democracy, as Gerd Billen said. It is clear that in the jurisprudence of the European Court of Human Rights, free speech includes the right to offend, to shock, or to disturb the state or any part of the population. We all cherish and respect this freedom of expression. But freedom of expression, as the European Court of Human Rights also said, does not include illegal incitement to violence and hatred. And let me say a word about the European Court of Human Rights in those days in which in some member states we see that highest courts are not being respected by government anymore, and the rule of law here and there is undermined. Europe is unique in the lessons it drew from the Second World War, from the times of the Nazis and from Auschwitz, in that it gave itself a court which controls the exercise of public power from the outside. That is the function of the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. To control that governments who are members of the Council of Europe respect rights of individuals, including free speech. And that is a great strength of ours. And we need no lessons from big corporations about respect of free speech. In the global ranking of free speech, Europe regularly ranks before many others, including the biggest members of the OECD. And no other continent has such an elaborated system of protection of free speech and fundamental rights generally as Europe. We have Strasbourg from the outside. We have the court in Luxembourg, who is responsible for protecting fundamental rights where EU law applies, and of course we have very strong constitutional rights in many member states. And this trias of judicial protection, one can probably say, is in a competition to show which of these courts is actually the best protector of fundamental rights. And this is an upward competition, where the strength of protections is rising. And you see it in particular in relation to the digital fundamental rights, where the courts are clearly competing with each other when it comes to putting checks on government surveillance, for example. So it is in this context that our laws, including the framework decision of the European Union on hate speech and xenophobia, are perfectly functional and make perfect sense and strike the right balance between what is necessary to protect free speech as a fundamental right, but what is also necessary to ensure that criminal activity is not brought forward. We don't need new empirics in Europe to know that words lead to actions. We have seen this on this continent before. And so the reason why we are so rigorous is exactly this historical background. We want to learn from history and not make the same mistakes again in a new technological environment. The EU is equipped with the framework decision 2008-913. This framework decision obliges member states to penalize hate speech and hate crimes based on a racist or xenophobic motivation. In terms of hate speech, the framework decision applies both to the online and the offline world, and it is confined to the public incitement to violence and hatred based on race, color, religion, descent, or national and ethnic origin. And of course, in parallel to working with the private companies, member states are enforcing this framework decision, and the European Commission watches that they enforce it. And if they don't enforce it, we are ready to take member states to the European Court of Justice. So let me also say very clearly, when I call on you to be active and get organized, I also mean tell the European Commission, if you think that in certain member states this framework decision is not properly enforced. We accumulate such information from different sources, then enter a dialogue with the member state concerned. And if this dialogue is successful, then improvements in the enforcement of this framework decision will be visible for everyone. And if it is not successful, then we will act before the European Court of Justice in the way which is possible in the European Union to hold member states to account. Given that hate speech is moving online and features frequently on social media, we need to complement our actions with actions to avoid re-victimization, spreading violence, and ensuring that illegal hate speech is expeditiously removed by online intermediaries and social media platforms. And this is why Commissioner Jourova decided to complement the framework decision with work with IT companies, with member states and NGOs to address the increasingly illegal hate speech online. We are all committed to deliver change, to ensure that the internet stays open to free and democratic expression, and we are conscious that hate speech and the fear of hate and being attacked on the internet is a key impediment to free speech for those who in a democracy are first of all called upon to be able to talk freely, which is journalists in particular and political office holders. But not only that. Let's be clear. If we don't do something, if we are not successful in our societies to stem this wave of incitement to violence and calls for violence on the internet and the threats, that is a problem for democracy and free speech. So we're doing something good for free speech by bringing these borders and enforcing them. Of course, this code of conduct now needs action, and I would say the burden of proof that they take this serious is on the companies. They are the ones which must report back to governments, the European Commission and the European public and civil society, that they are complying with what they have signed up to. And Germany is in front when it comes to the empirics. We are very thankful for the work of Germany on the empirics, but also in supporting organizations like yours. And we are very much watching the empirics there, and I have to say, there are some parts which look good, but generally speaking, so far, it is disappointing empirics. And it is incumbent on these companies who create external costs to society to do what is necessary to help us to reduce those costs and to ensure that the internet contributes to vibrant democracy and living fundamental rights. European Commission spends in a project with enough 740,000 euros to help you to monitor what these companies are doing. But I have to say, it is quite amazing that these companies make huge profits and externalize the costs of running their networks to society. So we have to pay up for the fact that they are not doing the job which is required in democracy. This is something we must also be very clear about. It cannot continue ad infinitum. These companies are bound by the law. And now let me tell you something which I observed in a practical test which I did with Facebook. If you notify, and we have to be very concrete here, if you notify to Facebook a website and some utterings or, which you think are hate speech or threatening to violence, you get an answer without any reasoning. And not only no reasoning, because the answer is, we have come to the conclusion that your complaint is not warranted, but no motivation. But not only that, but there is also no reference to the law. The answer says, we have come to the conclusion that this posting is not violating our community rules. Nowhere is there a reference to the fact that we have laws in Europe on this subject, and that these companies have to comply with these laws. You see, for me personally, it was quite a wake-up call in the discussions on this code of conduct to realize that it seems a very big step for these companies, first of all, to acknowledge that they have to comply with the law. And still in the notification system, everything is set up as if law does not exist. And of course, we all know the California Declaration on the Independence of the Internet, the ideology which says the Internet globally must be one. There can be no law, because if there's a law which comes from a nation state on the Internet, it leads to a fragmentation of the net, and that cannot be. Here also we have to speak a very clear language. This ideology of the Declaration of the Independence of the Internet means democracy in a country. It means nothing anymore. So actually, what we are facing here is maybe an undermining of legitimacy of the very basis of democracy and freedom, which is that we give ourselves law in self-determination, and we are able and willing to apply these laws to everyone who acts within our jurisdiction. And we have seen Google making the argument in the right to be forgotten case decided by the European Court of Justice that we have no jurisdiction over Google. Because Google in that case argued the following. The answer to the search question which you receive when you interrogate Google as a European citizen, it comes back from a computer in California. And therefore, if you have a problem with us, Google, you can only turn to an American judge in California, and only California law applies. Fortunately, this argumentation was rejected by the European Court of Justice. But let us just imagine that this argument would win the day in relation to hate speech and xenophobia. The computers of Facebook, they are in California. The argument could be made. So you see, it's not just the narrow issue of our codes of conduct and the empirics we're talking about here. We're talking about very fundamental matters pertaining to the question whether we still have a democracy which can make laws, and whether we still live in societies where these laws have a meaning and are enforced and are respected by everybody. That's why this code of conduct is so important. Now let me say a few things about the content of the code of conduct. Firstly, it provides that upon receipt of a removal request, the IT companies must review such requests not only against their rules and community guidelines, fine, but also against national laws transposing Framework Decision 2008-913 on xenophobia and hate speech. Secondly, the code provides that there must be a review for removal of illegal hate speech in less than 24 hours. And removal must take place, or decision must be taken within 24 hours. And if you read the hate speech code of conduct to the end, in the last paragraph, we say we will continue working with the companies on transparency. So for me, it is very clear that it cannot be that the answers which are given to citizens, where the percentages are lower than when notifications come from informed notifiers, that these answers contain no reasoning and motivation whatsoever why or why not something has been taken down. So I think we are very happy to hear from Germany the empirics, but also the willingness to move on. The European Commission also has said, Mrs. Jourova, Commissioner Jourova was also clear on that we are of the same attitude, that namely, if this voluntary commitment does not work, we must return to the law. And in the same way that we have been inspired by the prior code of conduct in Germany, I'm sure the European Commission will be also very inspired to see how Germany is moving forward on the law. But let's not make the mistake and think, well, this is all going to be fine. If the state then passes the law, then finally everything will be good. No. I think we should still together try to make things work in terms of cooperation between governments, NGOs, and companies. But it must be clear that the companies are the first ones which have to deliver on their promises. And it is, I think, clear from what we have heard from Gerd Billen and also from Commissioner Jourova, who will look at this very closely with justice ministers in December, and before that in the high-level group on hate speech and xenophobia together with you, that if the empirics reported by the companies themselves also don't improve, further steps will need to be taken. And I hope very much that also if we have to go down that route, we will have your very vocal support. Until then, let us try to make the best of the code of conduct. We very much look forward to your increased cooperation in the project which we are financing, to your reports, your empirics as a counter-check. And we very much hope that you also understand your cooperation as something which goes beyond fulfilling the project of the European Commission, beyond exchange of practice, but that you understand you coming together and networking as something which I would call counterpower. it is very clear that these companies need to feel the counterpower to be ready to move forward. And please show that you are part of the counterpower. Thank you very much.